Hello YouTube, welcome to my YouTube channel Annabella. Today I'm going to be doing my whole review of The Handmaid's Tale, the TV show. Seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. Why have I left it so long? Because I wanted to do a summary review. Because it is a very traumatic show, trigger warning, I'm putting that out there. Okay. Seasons 1 and 2 of The Handmaid's Tale are absolutely excellent. Season 1 in particular is book accurate, apart from the change of Serena's age, because in the book Serena is this old crone who walks with a stick, very much like the Rose character, both that they brought in for her to be Nick's wife in season 6. Spoiler warning, you're going to get spoilers, get over yourselves. In season 6, but they also reduced her age so that there could be more of a feud between Serena and Rose, Serena and June, so you've got that age-related thing going on. But I also think that Mrs. Putman basically took that old crone role on, even though she was straight up and she was prim and she was proper. We're going to get to Mrs. Putman. We're going to get to everybody. Season 1 and 2, excellent. Season 1 is book accurate because as The Handmaid's Tale as a book is studied for English Literature A-level. Don't watch the TV show if you're studying The Handmaid's Tale, because stuff happens in The Handmaid's Tale TV show that doesn't happen in the book, and your exam is just going to be on the book. It's not going to be on the TV show, and it's certainly not going to be on the Testament either, which is the next book about what happens after Gilead, after June. So season 1 and 2, absolutely excellent. Seasons 1, 2 and 3 are excellent. 4 and 5, it becomes torture porn. Sorry, I'm going to use that phrase because that's what it effectively does. But also we had a pandemic and that kind of delayed season 6 because I've been waiting for season 6. And what I found in season 6 was really rather interesting because the place of religion actually changed. So instead of all religion being bad, there was actually good Christianity was helpful to June. Bad Christianity suppressed people. And I found that was a really interesting concept that they'd actually put that in. But I think that was a sop to do with the mega crowd and Make America Great and Republicans under Trump personality cult, to be absolutely honest. Some of the things in season 6 were shocking. The cake shop window was an absolute delight. I really enjoyed that, to be absolutely honest, because I felt that it valued all the women's stories, because it is The Handmaid's Tale. In fact, it's all of those Handmaid's Tale, because the handmaids that we met in season 1, 2 and 3, many of them didn't survive. June did her usual June thing, which is, unfortunately, her plans were great, but they tended her being surviving, not everybody else. Moira's character development I also thought was excellent, because what is it like? You get out and then you're waiting for people to come. I also thought that Canada sending people back because they just couldn't cope anymore. The fact that Commander Joseph thought we're going to have to actually soften to allow some of the people back, because A, we need them, and 2, we're actually going to be a more sustainable country. The fact that they didn't want to follow through with that really threw him. They love power too much, the other commanders. Aunt Lydia's final epiphany, oh my God, the acting was absolutely sublime, but it took her long enough. I am going to mention Fred Waterford. I thought his character was brilliantly portrayed, and to be absolutely honest, Fred Waterford was a weak man who needed a strong woman. That was Serena Joy, because remember, Serena Joy wrote that book. They were the PR people for this whole thing. Serena Joy is a conservative woman who is bright and able and capable, and then complains when she's in a cage by her own beliefs and is like, but I wanted to be the exception. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that, Serena. You don't get to read. You lose your finger if you do that in that system. That's what happens. And Fred Waterford, and it was really interesting that Commander Joseph looked at marrying Mrs. Putman and looked at marrying Serena, and he was like, we don't have a place for you, Serena. And Serena was repeatedly not getting the message. He was like, your type of woman, which is very similar to June, is not going to survive here. You're too advanced. You're too capable. The girls that we're bringing up and growing now are not going to be like you. Mrs. Putman got that, which is why in the end she returned Charlotte to Janine, because Commander Joseph didn't actually get that. The stuff that he was doing with Charlotte was actually putting her more in danger by reading to her and encouraging her and encouraging the curiosity, was putting her life in danger. And Mrs. Putnam was like, no. We want her meek. We want her mild. We want her painting. We need to keep her alive. It's life or death here. Mrs. Putnam got that. And she loved to decorate. I love the scene where like, Joseph goes into his room and like everything has changed. He's like, no. And then she started flirting and he was like, no, what the hell? Absolutely not. I loved their fake marriage. It was just great. High comedy value for season 6 in a show that, you know, has tortured both men and women to the extremes of what it is to be masculine, what it is to be feminine. We are going to get to Nick, don't worry, I banked him. Serena, a lot of people moaned like, how did June accept Serena's forgiveness? And I'm like, maybe June didn't actually accept Serena's apology and forgave her, but perhaps she did it to allow Serena to move on, to become something else. And I love the fact that Serena ended up in the same position that June did, with a chair, a table, you know, and she lists the things, which is actually what happens in the first chapter of Handmaid's Tale. Go and read the book, it's brilliant. I love that. I love the fact that we actually got to see the difference between Nick and June's husband. I'm going to refer to him as June's husband, Mr. June. I love the fact that you actually saw the change between like what Luke was doing and what Nick was doing, and that change. And I love the fact that Joseph also reprimanded June, who was under the lavender haze of love. He was like, yes, but I never told Nick everything. I was always careful with what I told him. And I found that really fascinating, that even Commander Lawrence knew that Nick was in for good. Season 6 was basically about closure. It's sad that we never actually got Hannah back, but actually I think that was the point, because it does say somewhere in the book that the children that were taken become accustomed to their new Gilead lives, because they were taken when they were 4 or 5. So their old lives, they barely have any memories of their real parents. So Gilead is all they would have known. So it would be another rip to remove them again. And I think everybody by this point, because by this point the kids are like 14, 15, both boys and girls, and they're like, no, they've got to stay there. They've got to actually grow up in calm. We can't keep ripping people from their new cultures or cultures we don't particularly like. It's for them to decide when they're 18. Because it becomes too unsettling, not just for that child, but for everybody around them. And that's when societies start to fragment, because you've ripped up the cultural structure. We've created this new Gilead. Yes, you may not agree with it, but actually ripping children out that have been placed, that have been ripped from one culture, to then rip them from their new culture, which is oppressive, to then put them into a more progressive culture, is actually more psychologically damaging. Even though... And I found that argument fascinating. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So poor Hannah gets to stay where she is. Aunt Lydia had her epiphany. Janine, poor Janine. Oh, God. Janine's last commander. I mean, what can you say, really? She does attract them, doesn't she? And little Charlotte, you could see, I loved little Charlotte's girl. She was absolutely adorable, but she was basically going to be another Janine. I'm glad Mrs. Putnam actually was like, no, as soon as we're going to get to the plane, we're going to have to talk about that. Lawrence's character development was beautiful, because in a way he was honouring his dead wife, his first wife, not his fake wife. Sorry, Mrs. Putnam. But he knew that Mrs. Putnam would be able to survive. But even Mrs. Putnam understood Gilead far better than anybody else in this show. She was like, this is how it is. This is what we're doing. You've got to get with the programme. If you stay with the programme, you're going to live. If you're not, you're going to die like poor old Eden did, which was Nick's first wife, or eco-wife that they gave him. And it all went terribly, terribly wrong, because Eden was too young and Nick was too old. And it was like, oh, no one was understanding. And it's very interesting that he's loyal to Rose, because she's a commander's daughter, but not loyal to Eden, who was basically an 18-year-old kid that he was put with. And the fact that after June, he knew he needed a more mature woman. I mean, but Rose was pregnant forever with that child. So we still don't know the fate of Rose and the child, because it was all up in the air at the end, quite literally. And then people are like, but Nick, they've ruined Nick's character. They've done this, that, the other. And I'm like, no, Nick got put in a position that became untenable, because the pressures on him were coming from his father-in-law. Joseph knew this and only shared certain information. There was no way ever that Nick was ever going to be able to leave Gilead. And from the moment he fell in love with June, it was always going to be a tragic romance because he was a war criminal. I remember very clearly the other commander, who didn't use his commander title, by the way, the one that Serena fell in love with, that was actually a nice guy, basically Mr. Waterford, but without the horrible, stuff going on. The fact that he knew that he couldn't work with Nick. Nick is basically an incel who has taken power, became an eye, then became a war criminal to set up Gilead. There's no way on earth that anybody would be able to work with him. He was in too deep and he knew it. His only saving grace was the fact that he got his own daughter Nicole/Holly out and June out. That was the only good thing that he actually did, because he knew that June, very much like Serena, would not survive in the Gilead system. For a whole host of reasons. She was too clever, she was too educated, whatever you want to call it. And I find that absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And it's almost like the Handmaid's Tale book ends with Nick turning up with the eyes, putting June in a van, and we don't know where she's going. There's a movie that has them living in a caravan that's just outside the borders, like he's protected them. They're out of the system and they're well away. And he can do that because he's a powerful eye. And that's pretty much what Nick does. He's a powerful eye. He can get the people he cares about out of danger. And I love the fact of what Nick says to... I'm seeing her now. She cooks. She's one of the... See, I can't even remember their names now. There's the handmaids, there's the eco-wives, there's the wives, and then there's the people that just do the servanting. And he says it to her. And she was the one that had that glorious scene where she goes to a fast food place, gets food that's made by somebody else and enjoys drinking the Coke, and she's not making the food. I loved that scene between her and Nick, where Nick says to her, "This is Gilead. You've got to look after yourself. I cannot help you." And he's so to her face, because everybody thinks that Nick's on board with them. He's not. He's like, wake up everybody. We're not all in Mayday. Mayday was a blip. If we keep going on being Mayday, then the whole of society will just keep being burned. You have to accept this is the system we've got, and you have to save yourself. And that was really powerful, I thought, because it summed Nick's character up to a T. He's literally, yes, this is the system I found myself in. This is where I've got to. I am only able to save those I'm able to save, which is why I couldn't help her find her sister, though she eventually did manage to find her. But they couldn't get out. Again, it's like, no, you came back. You're staying now. This is what it is. And I found that really cathartic, because you can't keep having revolutions. It's like I said before, you've taken people, put them in a new system, they've learned this new system, you then want to rip them out again and put them back into a more progressive system. How much damaging is that going to do to people's psychology? I loved the fact that we had that scene, and then people were like, but they've ruined Nick. And I was like, no, Nick was already ruined. We just didn't see it. We just didn't know him well. They did show flashbacks of him becoming one of the Brotherhood of Jacob or whatever it was beforehand in that coffee shop. And Nick even himself says, oh, you wouldn't want to have known me before. You wouldn't even gone near me, June, because I wasn't clever enough. I was like, just a working class boy. You wouldn't have touched me. I wasn't like Luke. And I love the fact you really get the difference between Luke standing up for June repeatedly all the time. Nick only does it when he's pushed into a corner. But that's the only good thing that comes from Nick, is the fact his love for June saved his character long term. Because, yes, I know Commander Lawrence redeems himself on that plane with the bomb, and the fact that Joseph sits down to Nick and he says, you really should have listened to her. And then the plane blew up, and such was that. And it was absolutely horrific, because June was forever torn between Nick and Luke, because they both loved her. It was genuine love. They both loved her in different ways. Which means that when June goes back, and she's back in that room and she starts writing The Handmaid's Tale as a way of basically getting Gilead out of her system, because she's truly trauma damaged. I mean, it got to a point where she was like, oh yeah, by the way, I've killed somebody, and everybody was like, but that wasn't actually between two countries, so you're fine, it's just between you and your deity. And she's a bit shocked. That was Commander Waterford, and she's like, oh my goodness, I have gone so far from moral human lines, it is unbelievable to survive in that system. That's what Gilead has turned them all. They've taken good people and turned them into monsters. And that's effectively Nick's character arc. He was good, and then he became a monster because he wanted power. He wanted what Anakin wanted, which was like, I want more and I know I shouldn't. It's the same old, wanting more, good intentions. I want power, I want prestige, I want status. And their whole lives fall apart. There you go. But what I really enjoyed is the fact that in the Handmaid's Tale book, the book itself leaves Nick open-ended. You're not sure whether he's a good guy or whether he's a bad boy. It just leaves it like that. And that's almost, from a TV show perspective, June not willing to say, because he's the father of her second daughter, who he loved and adored and protected and did everything right by June and Nicole. There's nothing you can say about Nick that's bad about that at all. So I love the fact that June herself leaves it open-ended, because she's like, he was both good and bad, and this whole Rose business came later. So overall, I'm giving the whole Handmaid's Tale TV show 5 out of 5. It was brilliant. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but actually I really liked the time to just think this through. The cake shop window was brilliant, where you saw all of the handmaids that have either died or gone, and the fact that Emily went back because she had the same problem. She'd been too changed. She loved the fact that her wife and son was safe, and it was great to see them again, but she couldn't adapt to being in that system again, to being in the more progressive society from Gilead. And that just shows you, and she was a progressive lesbian, and just shows you, human beings are fragile things. Really fragile things. They cling to what they know, even if what they know is harmful. And you also think that Emily went back to protect her family, because she was worried, I've made them targets just by being here because Gilead is looking for me. So that was really smart. June did a lot of good, but she also did a lot of bad. But hopefully the ending itself is unclear, because you're not quite sure what kind of Gilead is going to come up from the ashes of the last revolution. Maybe it will be progressive like Commander Joseph wanted, be a little bit more kinder to people. We hope, but it's not going away. And it's interesting in the Testament that there is some prejudice towards the Handmaid's Tale children, but actually they were children that were very much wanted and needed, but they were only wanted and needed by the commander. As soon as that commander who's in power of your household, the children and the wives become targets for it, because they've got no protector. And that pretty much sums up Nick's role. He protected his handmaid, which was June, his daughter Nicole, his wife Rose, and his son, and he did that expertly, because if he had not got on that plane, Rose and his son would be in danger. June is fine, she's got Luke. He's got to protect those because they're fragile, because he does not trust Rose's father-in-law. I wouldn't trust him either. Anyway, I'm giving the whole thing 5 out of 5. It's a brilliant TV show. I will actually quite enjoy watching some more of season 6 again. That's well worth a watch, purely because of all the pain and the suffering that we went through as viewers and as characters. It was horrific. Everybody changed and grew, even if they didn't want to. Cough, cough, Red. So that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this review. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and do click the notification bell for my next video. Bye!